Gotta keep it real simple, keep it real simple. New York City, bring it back to ground zero. Cause it all comes down to this: love God and love teaching. Our school system keeps breaking, and teachers are the ones who are saving. But it all comes down to this: love God and love teaching. Our school system keeps breaking, and teachers are the ones who are saving. But it all comes down to this: love God and love teaching. Don't forget how amazing you are. Stay tuned for this week's gem. Hello, fellow fellows and fellow educators. This is Diamond Emerald Skinner bringing you another gem: God, good vibes, education, and motivation for this brand new week of blended learning. The first gem that I want to lay on you for today is this experience that you see now. I'm using Zoom, and I'm using their shared screen feature, but using slides as background. So this is not absolutely brand new. They had this feature for a while, but with the most recent update, I've tried it, and this is what it looks like. So I can move my face, as you can see, around the slide. I am using a green screen to make sure that my background is hidden, but this is just a feature that comes within Zoom, and I think it works very well. So it helps me engage learners, but not only being able to share the content and my face, I can actually move my face and say things like, do you see my head? What word, right, is underneath my head? And things like that, just to change things up again, make things more visually stimulating. One thing to note is when you are using this feature, students are not able to annotate on the screen. So I was using this last week, and I actually wanted to be able to use that annotation feature. I cannot do both simultaneously. So I need to be deliberate about scheduling and engaging in my classes in a way that if I want them to annotate, I am screen sharing and making sure that's available. However, if I want to just use the slides as background and interact with them using my head, then I will do that. But it's deliberate. One thing to note as well is I've tried this feature on 3 different computers. It didn't always work. It would say sometimes that PowerPoint wasn't downloaded, even though it was. So make sure that if you're using a Google Slides presentation, you must download it as a PowerPoint presentation before you're able to screen share it as a background. And as always, try it out before you actually engage in your session, so that you're doing things smoothly and effectively and excellently in front of your children. And I always encourage you to use multiple devices, as I mentioned before, so you can see what your screen actually looks like on the other screens. You can guide students to make your screen big, to pin or spotlight your image as well. But note, once you screen share, it does make things bigger for the participant. So I think it works pretty well. I'm going to go to the next slide and present to you another information tool. So 2 things I want to bring to you today are e-note taking and using 100%. So first, in terms of e-note taking, we always take notes on our students, right? I know that I've gone through a litany of PDs at the beginning of the year, mostly presented by other teachers, which I'm grateful for, about ways that they take notes and annotate in their classroom about certain student behaviors. We then take those annotations and turn them into report card comments, notes for IEPs, feedback on grades, anything like that. We need notes. This season of remote learning means that our note-taking has shifted. I use physical notes sometimes when I'm in the building with my kids. I have a spreadsheet, which I'll explain in another gem, of a dashboard that I've created based on some outside training in order to keep track of all the things that I need to keep track of. But one of those things, during every classroom session, I'm taking notes on my kids. However, those note-taking techniques have changed. So you'll see, we have here camera broken and camera broken. Our students have access to wonderful technology, their cell phones, their laptops, their iPads, whether it's been given to them by the DOE or given to them by a parent or bought for their own devices. We have access to cameras. That's why our world has changed so dramatically. That's why social media and injustice has been able to be broadcast, because our students do have access to cameras. So I put that annotation, camera broken, there deliberately, because all of these take some type of follow-up. If a child is saying that their camera is broken, that means that they need to be communicating with you in some other type of way. That also means that I need to follow up with that child and that family to ensure that they are able to get a device that has a working camera. At my school, I know at some schools it's not required for them to turn on their cameras because we don't know what's going on in their homes. People may be self-conscious, but in any way, shape, or form, if we can encourage and support an environment where kids are seen physically and seen emotionally, academically, all those things as well, it'll make our entire environments better. Why not enable our students to be comfortable in the places where they live and accept the fact that all of our homes look different? Why not enable students to have a green screen and use technology to their advantage so that they're not hiding their circumstances, but that they're showing up in a new way that's advantageous for them? There are ways to work on this, but no, we have to find ways to address these issues. So we have camera broken and camera broken, both of those requiring a follow-up. Participates, maybe you have seen right away that this child is active and they're ready to go. Maybe they started the Zoom call by unmuting and saying hi to everybody. That's great. Annotate it because they're the students that you're going to use to call on during the class to engage with. Use this chat. If you've seen that someone is actively using it, that's another tool to engage, to know that this student can use chat. So maybe at the next lesson, if you haven't seen them, you may have forgotten who was active. But in your note-taking, you can identify, if Jimmy was using the chat on Monday, but he's not engaging with me on Tuesday, there may be some discrepancy. So if Jimmy just happens to say something like, oh, I can't find the chat button, you have notes to say that on Monday he was using the chat pretty well. Loud house. I love this annotation. One, because it reminds me of that cartoon show, but also because it helps us be responsive to our students. If I've asked a child to unmute, or maybe they unmuted themselves and I've muted them because I'm paying attention, right? I've muted them because I've identified they have a loud house. I actually write an L or an LH next to their spreadsheet on my piece of paper or on my dashboard. That means I will engage with them in a different way. I will praise them for showing up, right? I will acknowledge the fact that they have headphones. If they don't have headphones, I will suggest it. Probably not openly, depending on the class. I might privately chat with them that. I will make sure that they know how to use the chat and the reactions and or annotations or peer deck, whatever I'm using. I will make sure they have another way to engage, right? And I will not ask them to unmute and speak. I will not call on them to read a slide because they have a loud house and I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable or disrupt the flow of my classroom. But I'm using that information to respect them, but also hold them accountable in other ways. I will say things like, thank you so much, Timothy, for coming and engaging. I know there's a lot going on in your house right now. Say hi to your little sister, and I'm so glad that you're here. Next time, I'm going to ask them a question. Hey, Timothy, I know that you can't speak right now. Which one do you think it is? Write in the chat for me, A, B, C, or D. Just go in the chat. You have 10 seconds, Timothy. I know it's loud. Do you have 10 seconds to write in the chat? I'm looking for that. Moving on. I'm giving them specific, clear instructions, acknowledging where they're at, but keeping them held accountable to high expectations. Wi-Fi issues. If you've unmuted a child, they speak and you can hear that garbly thing, you know how it's that delay, that horrible noise, and it's a horrible experience for everyone. One, I'm gonna mute them as soon as I can, right? That's important because the way the technology works, it will let the person speak until they're done speaking. So if there's a delay, it's gonna play that entire delay. So the quicker you can mute a child or a person when that happens, the better, because it's gonna play until someone stops it. Try to restate, listen closely. If you can restate or catch anything that child says, turn it back and give them praise for what they said. I think you said something, or it sounded like you were saying, or I know it was Wi-Fi issues. If they can write in the chat, give them the chance to do that as well, but also give them a chance to experience some type of greatness later, right? Help them stay committed and welcomed in the experience. And note too, that that's a child I'm also not gonna call on to speak, but they wanna participate. I wanna make sure that I find other ways for them to engage and also get praise. Group leaders. I love getting into breakout groups that I have now, specific jobs for students. I have a student in breakout groups that they're in charge of sharing the screen. I have another student who's in charge of making sure that the answers on the screen are correct. I have another person in charge of making sure that everyone turns in their exit ticket. There's a lot of things you can do. Another person that makes sure everyone speaks. You can give these students specific jobs in their groups, and you can now delegate those groups. So I've annotated the first time that we had breakout groups, I popped into groups and I was like, oh, this person's sharing, that person's sharing, that person's sharing. Great. Next time we had class, we're in breakout groups. I'm like, okay, Alex, Leah, Michaela, Kane, you guys are the leaders for these groups because I saw them do it before. And because Zoom has it where I can manually set things up and put people in groups, I can take a minute, give them an independent task, or give them time to review the questions before we go into breakout groups, or give them time to pull up the resources before we go into breakout groups, or give them time to meditate. While they're doing that, I am making sure that one of my group leaders is in every single group. Then I come back and say, these are the people who are doing X, Y, and Z. Boom, 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 boom. If they have an issue with that, they can write me. So before I get to the groups, I can see that, oh, Michaela's Wi-Fi is struggling today, or Michaela is having trouble today, so she's not going to share. I can pick someone else to share, put them in the breakout groups, and call it a day. Follow up. That's the last thing. If I have asked a student to engage with me in multiple ways and they have not responded, I'm making some type of note that I need to follow up after that class to identify what exactly was going on that made them not engage and how can I support them later. Mind you, it's not punitive. It starts out with, hey, are you okay? That's the type of email that I'm sending to check up on the child to see what happens. Then I can get to the root of, I asked you 3 direct questions and you did not reply to me. Tell me what's going on. Or I see that you were not able to complete the work today. Or I assigned you to be the group leader, but when I jumped into your breakout group, you had either left or your camera was off or you weren't speaking. Tell me what's going on so I can help support you in completing and being a better, more engaged student during remote learning. Right? I'm doing all these things to make sure that I have 100%. 100% is a TLAC or a teach like a champion technique, or for our purposes, teach like a diamond, technique that helps us ensure that we have 100% engagement in class. When I was using this technique to judge fellows as they were performing their summer school duties, we never required 100% as the standard, meaning if they had majority of the students engaged, that means they met the requirement for that specific technique. However, I want to push us during this time. When you have a limited number of students before you in person or in a small group virtually, I dare you. I double, triple dog dare you to get 100% engagement in your classrooms. What that might look like is when I'm in person and I have 10 students, even before when I was teaching my 12 to 1 class in a small group setting, I would say things like, this is the second bullet point. There's only 10 of us, so I need to hear from everyone. This sets up the expectation that no one is allowed to opt out, which also connects to the no opt-out strategy of TLAC as well. But this is the idea that since there's a limited number of you, there's no excuses. There's no excuses for me to be able to hear from you individually, and that's what we're trying to do. So I set that up before students even start to work, so that they know that in this next work time that they're going to be able to produce something verbally to share with everyone, so the work better be on point. Virtually, I've used a technique which I just call unmute, right? There's an option in Zoom where you can click and ask everyone to unmute. Then a pop-up will come on the screen and it'll say the host has asked you to unmute. So you can click that or you can click the mic to unmute yourself. I will tell them, we're giving them instructions, right? Everyone unmute and say a word, right? So for instance, this last week, a vocab word was Judaism. And so I'd ask the students to quickly say Judaism and unmute themselves. So I'd say, go. I would listen for them to do that. And I would expect 100%, right? This is the chance where a student has to really allow themselves to engage. Remember, if I have someone with a loud house, I'm not going to expect them to unmute and engage. However, if they do have a loud house, this activity makes it safe for them to do so. They're doing it quickly. You don't really know who it is. You can unmute. I must say, this does allow for some misbehavior. If you have a student who would like to unmute and just say negative things, that also allows for that as well. So it's really important that you've established a strong classroom culture within your group and you've established clear norms for what's appropriate and not appropriate. And then when you speak and you set up your expectations, you're clear about what that means. For instance, I did this technique the other day. I had 30 kids in the class. I feel like I only heard about 8 voices. That's insufficient. That's not 100%. That's not what I asked for. So I had them do it again. And I said something like, wow, I feel like I only heard about 8 voices when there's like 30 of us on this call. So let's try that again. When I say go, and only when I say go, you're going to unmute and say the word Islam. 3, 2, 1, go. And then I show them actively listening for voices. Maybe I'm even looking at the participants list because you can see who unmutes and who does not. Right? So I can look there and say, oh, I see Kyle, you didn't unmute. Will you unmute please and say Islam? Okay, thank you. Oh, Haven, I didn't hear your voice. Will you unmute and say Judaism? Got it, right? So I'm being deliberate about these interventions to make sure that every student is being seen or heard. There's another option that I'm listening here at the bottom is for engagement, right? A phrase like, You have 3 options: raise your Zoom hand to speak, write in the chat publicly, or write to me privately. They can present an answer. So maybe you're asking students to write a full answer or share a complete thought, right? Which season is better, winter or fall? A student can raise their hand and I can see who wants to verbally speak, right? Maybe if they have trouble writing or they don't want to write, they can speak and share. And if they don't have a loud house, what if they do have a loud house and they have trouble writing? My options are going to be very simple, as in they're not going to have to write a full sentence. They might have to write only W or F to show me that they're participating. Then I can then I can gain further engagement later. Or maybe they can annotate on the screen, not while I'm sharing my head, right? And I can say, please write on the screen W or F or circle. Maybe I have the images there and they have to circle which one that they want. But keeping in mind, if I have a child who's on a Chromebook, who also has a loud house and who also is not writing fluently, I haven't given them a lot of options, unless I also give them the chat option of writing just the letter in. Because I do have students in one class who are of all varying levels. I have students who are very verbal and who can speak. I have students who can read fluently. I have students who can write fluently. I have students who can not do either one of those things, but are present and actively engaged and who can write a letter in the chat and repeat words, right? And begin to understand and gain a vocabulary. Okay, so those are my few gems for today, right? We started out talking about Zoom and the ability to share your screen and slides as a background, and make sure that you've updated that latest aspect of Zoom, because Zoom now allows you to have breakout rooms where students can self-select. Still working the kinks out on that. Once I have it perfected, I will bring that to you. But overall, teachers, I just want to say to you, fear not and shine bright. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And to keep it simple, you are a great teacher. You've been a great teacher. Don't forget how wonderful you are.